Thank you for plugging into this Family Life News podcast, streaming issues-driven, family-focused news.
This is Faith Under Fire. Each Thursday on Family Life, we give voice to religious battlegrounds in this nation. I'm your host, Tracy Lynn. With us today, constitutional scholar Douglas Laycock, professor of law at the University of Virginia. So the federal funding granted to Christian colleges has come under scrutiny from LGBT advocates. Douglas, in a nutshell, do you know what sort of federal funding these religious schools typically receive?
Well, it varies a lot by the type of school, but except for a couple of schools that refuse all federal money, all colleges and universities get student financial aid money from the federal government. The bigger universities with research programs, places like Baylor and Notre Dame and Brigham Young, get research grants for specific projects. There are probably some other kinds of federal money, but those are the two biggies, research money and student financial aid.
And so 33 current or former mostly Christian college students brought a suit last week against the Department of Education in an effort to do away with the exemption for religious schools when it comes to sexual orientation and gender identity. As a longtime student of our Constitution, do you agree that these exemptions are unconstitutional?
No. These 33 students and lots of people who sympathize with them view every religious exemption just as a form of discrimination against LGBTQ students. It's not that at all. It's a protection for a different right that is equally important, that is explicitly in the Constitution, and that's the right to religious liberty. And we can protect gay students and religious people and religious institutions in this country if we care to try. But there are too many people on both sides who don't care to try. Too many conservative believers want to deny most rights to LGBTQ, and way too many on the LGBTQ side who want to deny any rights to religious conscience objectors. And this lawsuit is a manifestation of that. You can't have any exemptions. Everybody has to see the world the same way we do.
Great point, Douglas. Do you think that this concerted effort by the Religious Exemption Accountability Project now is sort of a backup plan in case the LGBT community doesn't get all it seeks in the Equality Act, which is currently being debated in the U.S. Senate?
It's more than a backup plan. The Equality Act would add gay rights and gender identity to all the statutes that prohibit discrimination. And it would repeal all statutory religious liberty defenses like the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. It has no religious exemptions in it. So the Equality Act is very one-sided and goes very far. But it would not protect the LGBTQ students from religious exemptions found by the courts directly under the Free Exercise Clause. So this lawsuit is aimed at both categories. It's aimed at holding unconstitutional the existing Title IX exemptions, but also aimed at establishing that the Constitution itself precludes any kind of religious exemption. So that goes much further than the Equality Act. They would want this lawsuit even if they get the Equality Act.
So if the 33 plaintiffs win their case, what type of ripple effect could this have on Christian colleges in the future?
Well, if they win, it would be the end of all educational exemptions in the gay rights and gender identity context. And every school would have to decide whether to comply or give up all its federal money. But there wouldn't be an in-between.
So there are some schools, I think Hillsdale College, for example, probably doesn't accept any federal funding, and so they would be able to continue to hold to their religious principles.
Correct.
And so that's what these other schools might end up doing if this case is won by those 33 plaintiffs. Douglas, this class action suit is not the first attempt to dismantle the religious exemption granted to religious colleges. What do you think our listeners need to know about attempts like this to religious liberty?
Well, this case may have some success in the lower courts. I don't think it's a winner in the Supreme Court, at least as currently composed. They may or may not provide religious exemptions under the Constitution, but they're certainly not going to hold that religious exemptions are unconstitutional. That's not going to happen. I think there's a group of religious colleges trying to intervene in this case, and that's important because we don't know how vigorously the Biden administration will defend it. In the longer run, there's another bill competing with the Equality Act, it's the Fairness for All Act, which would add gay rights to pretty much every federal discrimination statute, but also provide religious exemptions. It really is a compromise that protects both sides. And I think people, both religious believers and religious institutions, need to be doing more to support the Fairness for All Act and encourage their representatives in Congress to compromise and protect both sides rather than trying to give a complete win to one side and crush the other side.
That's University of Virginia professor Douglas Laycock. I'm Tracy Lynn, Family Life News.